Hello, everyone. How was lunch? Everyone have a full belly? It is my honor to reintroduce Allara, as well as our beautiful, esteemed panelists. They are all in front of me right now, and I see them, and I'm very excited for this. So I would love to introduce Allara now to come up. And then I would also like to ask the panelists to come up as well. This is for LOTUS. This is for Cesar.
Can we quickly reposition and can we ask the two humans here to just swap seats?
No, 1 second.
I can pull. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Hello. How's everyone doing? Microphone check. Microphone. Is this working? Okay, wonderful. We're good. How's everyone doing? You good? Are you ready for the next part of our summit? We have our panelists here. Is everybody ready to go? Do I need this microphone? I'm thinking we can do away with it, so I'll just keep that off to the side and use sign language. I'd like to welcome our panelists. So we're here representing the Office of Disability Affairs and LGBTQA, and we're thrilled to have you here and honored to recognize our panelists here today and to speak with them a little bit more about their experiences. So would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, my name is Cesar, and this is my sign name. I live in the San Francisco area, and I've been there for 11 years. I am here representing Mr. Gay San Francisco as the first deaf gay winner in history and since 1970s. So thank you, I'm happy to be here today.
Hi everyone, my name is King Lotus Boy. I use he, him, or zir pronouns. They, them is also okay if you forget. I am an artist, community organizer. I live in ceded Lishan Ohlone land, which is also known as Oakland, California. And my little tagline I like to say when I am hosting shows or performing is that I'm disabled, neurodivergent, and chronically illustrious. And I'm very, very honored to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rosemary McDonnell-Horita. I use she, her pronouns. I am based in Berkeley, California, also on Ohlone land. I'm here as a disability activist, impact producer, and really happy to be on this panel with an incredible set of people. I also have my service dog with me. His name is Dom, D-O-M. And if you see him, I know that you'll want to touch him, and he also wants that. But he's working, as we all are, so we just ask that you let him do his job so that he can focus. And really excited to be in conversation with everyone.
Wonderful. I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself, but many of you already know me from this morning. Some of you I haven't met yet, and you might not know who I am. So just briefly, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Allara, and my pronouns are he, him. And thank you. Happy to be here. So let's get ready. You excited for some questions? Are you curious to learn more about these people? Do you have your own questions, perhaps? All right, great. Okay, so my question for all of you, each of you embodies multiple identities across queerness, disability, cultural backgrounds. How have your intersecting identities shaped your personal and professional journeys? And maybe you could speak to, things you've experienced on your journeys, such as challenges or rewards that you may have experienced along the way. Who would like to start?
All right, I don't mind starting. I have 3 identities myself. I am a deaf individual, obviously. I am gay, obviously. And I am also Hispanic. So those 3. And really, it's been very challenging. In my upbringing, I remember as a deaf child, having darker skin, trying to figure out who I was and how the world saw me, and who thought that, maybe I couldn't do things that others could do because of I am deaf, I am gay, I am Latino. And it's been a challenge throughout my life, of course, but I have faith, there are different ways to achieve goals, and that's helped me become who I am today. Becoming Mr. Gay San Francisco, I remember when people first encouraged me to join, and I felt like, can I do that? I wasn't taught that deaf people were capable of doing this kind of thing. And so standing on stage, I found this is my home. This is who I am, and I wouldn't be who I am without these experiences. So being able to be in front of a crowd, to have conversations, to perform, and actually win Mr. Gay San Francisco, it was a huge honor. And that title, I feel like not everyone understands the importance of it, because San Francisco is one of the most rich areas and diverse communities. So that means having this position means I have some weight and a platform in terms of talking to people about accessibility who may work in the mayor's office or work in the city district. And one example, the Muni train, you're probably familiar. I realized that they didn't have accessible screens or captioning for announcements. And so for me, I felt like I had to basically put my head out the window to figure out where my stop was. I was just lost, and it was hell as a deaf person. It was not accessible at all. And so I really encouraged them to put in screens with captioning. And finally, that did happen. So those kind of challenges, that's just an example. Thank you.
So I'd like to pass it over to the other panelists. Lotus Boy, would you like to respond?
Sure, thank you, and thank you, Cesar, for sharing that. So I have a lot of different identities. I'll share a few of the ones that maybe are most relevant to shaping me into who I am, as you see before me. So if you can't also tell, I'm also very gay. I'm also transgender and non-binary, transmasculine, and I'm a multiracial Chinese and white anti-American. And as I mentioned before, I have physical disabilities and limitations. I also have neurodivergence, ADHD, and I am also chronically ill. I have fibromyalgia, which I was diagnosed with at age 13. Though from that point on, for the first half of my life, I didn't really get care around that after I had that diagnosis. Unfortunately, I was raised in a family and kind of culturally to just work hard, keep your head down, don't make a lot of noise, stay humble, don't talk about your pain because no one wants to hear about that. And especially when someone who is always in pain, I'm just in varying levels, right, every single day. It really damaged me a lot, and I, had a lot of internalized ableism for most of my life, and I just pushed through a lot. And I actually didn't start openly identifying as disabled and chronically ill and all of these things until 2020. And by that point, I had already been involved with a lot of disability justice activism in the Bay Area. But it wasn't until I started performing as a drag artist and seeing how inaccessible a lot of San Francisco is, a lot of Oakland is, a lot of just the world, is, but particularly with performing and art, which is something I've always wanted to do and always been a very medium, creative person. But up until the point that I started drag, I always thought, well, art is selfish. Being an artist, that's too selfish. There's more important things I need to do in the world to help other people. I know how to write well, I know how to speak well, and that's more important, quote unquote, of a skill, which is silly, because we're all important. All areas and ways of expressing ourselves and finding who we are important. But yeah, it was the global pandemic, which we're all still living through, combined with really having a conversation with myself and saying, no, actually, I am an artist. I do have important things to say. My artwork is, meaningful to people. And also connecting with other, specifically queer and trans disabled people and queer and trans disabled Black, Indigenous people of color, mostly online, right? Because the first few years of the pandemic, we were mostly online. But I had never, seen so many parts of myself represented in that way, which then gave me permission to continue being more of myself and growing more into myself. And gave me the courage to finally speak out and say, no, I am disabled and I need these things if you want me to be on your stage. And I'm not gonna ask you twice. I might say please, because I'm a recovering people pleaser, like many disabled people, right? We're kind of just socialized to think that our needs are something we have to beg for or something we have to earn to deserve. And I still struggle with internalized ableism. I'm not like, ooh, I'm just this performer and suddenly, oh, all my problems are solved. No, it's still very hard, and performing is still very, very draining for me. I typically have to leave a full day before and after a gig to rest and to just recover my spoons. But I am very blessed and I am privileged, and just to speak to kind of the question that, part of the question that asked about, rewards or successes, although I do have, maybe more needs, more access needs than the average drag performer that you may see in the Bay Area, I do still have different privileges, right? Being a multiracial person who is half white and very lighter skinned just gives me more access to things, right? And I know that I have the privilege to advocate versus a melanated person who would be saying the same thing as I would and be treated even more horribly, And again, not to say that I'm treated horribly all the time. I'm not always treated the best all the time either, right? And then one other part of that, though, is being a trans person, being someone who was raised as a girl, an East Asian girl and woman, and also being someone who hasn't yet medically transitioned, unfortunately, still makes me very vulnerable to a lot of misogyny, a lot of racism, and just a lot of transphobia from people who aren't willing to understand or to listen. So like everyone, we all have different parts of our identities that are more privileged and different parts that are more marginalized. And I think, though, leaning into disability and disability community has been such a gift to just, make me so much more present with myself and all of these intersecting things and how I can best show up for everyone around me, too.
Thank you for that. Rosemary.
It's tough to follow. Such incredible speakers. I also have a multitude of identities. I was born with my disability, one of my disabilities, but it wasn't until I was 16 that I was proud to say that I was disabled, that I wasn't trying to hide my disability, which seems so silly. How do you hide a wheelchair? But when I was growing up, I didn't see anyone else who looked like me, and I didn't want to be in the special ed wing. I didn't want to be associated with other quote-unquote disabled people because I saw how they were being treated. And I wanted nothing to do with it. I tried to blend, quote-unquote, blend in, but I was hiding and denying a part of myself that I didn't realize. I also am a first-generation daughter of an immigrant. I am queer, and I know that I have a lot of these identities. And as I was a youth growing up, I had a really incredible opportunity to go to a camp for students with disabilities called the California Youth Leadership Forum. It's based in Sacramento, and students with disabilities who are high school juniors and seniors get to go stay on campus, and there are mentors and staff who are all also disabled. And it was a moment when I came into that space, and I was like, this is the first time I'm in a room of all disabled people in my mind. But I had been in so many other spaces with other disabled people, in special education classrooms, in conferences, and all these other spaces, but I didn't identify with the community yet. And so at that moment, I said, oh, this is a community. I can opt into this community. We have similar lived experiences. We might not have the same disability, but we've all experienced ableism, and we know how challenging it is to exist in this world. And so that wasn't something that we had to even really discuss. We got to just be teenagers and talk about the boys that we liked, or the clothes that we wanted to wear, or how our parents don't let us do the things that we want to do, like really typical teenager things. But then I learned about disability history. And I was born in 1993, so I don't know a world pre-Americans with Disabilities Act. I was able to go to public school in my neighborhood, the same public school that my brother went to, but I know for lots of disabled folks, that's not the case. And so I feel very privileged that I came after the Americans with Disabilities Act, not to say that it's perfect or that it solves all problems or that it erases ableism in our society, but I realized that there were so many other people who came before me who fought for me to be able to go to school, who fought for curb cuts and accessible public transportation. But I also realized that none of those people looked like me. Like, shout out to Judy Heumann and Ed Roberts and all the incredible things that they did, but they don't look like me. And so I was often retelling disabled history from a very white lens, and in the process, erasing myself. And that didn't feel fair or appropriate to do anymore. And so I started to look to other leaders in community and do more reading and find out who actually was in the building for the 504 sit-in in San Francisco. It wasn't just Judy Heumann and Ed Roberts. It was people like Brad Lomax and Kitty Cohn and the Black Panthers. And so it really does mean that you have a community around you that is meeting everyone's needs. And I feel now more than ever, disabled people are keeping other disabled people alive. because we have been saying for a long time that we need to prioritize disabled people. We need to think about how we're going to create access. And it's not just because I have a disability that I have access needs. Everyone in this room has access needs, whether it is I need a food break, or I need to go to the bathroom, or I have a sick kid at home, so I'm gonna leave my phone on in case someone calls and I need to step out. We all have needs. We just have been denying ourselves those needs because we think that they're too much. And so I am constantly trying to remind myself to unlearn all of the things that I've been indoctrinated with, that my needs are just as valid as everyone else's needs. And if I want to create a world that includes me, that means I need to talk to other people who also have similar lived experiences, and people who are not in this room, people who don't have voices, who are not invited to speak on panels, whose experiences are just as valid as ours. And so a lot of the journey in my work has been trying to bring as many perspectives and elevate voices of marginalized folks within the disability community, because it has been so cis, straight, and white. And it hasn't been until the last few years, really, and with the leadership of folks like Sins Invalid in the East Bay, who were really queering the conversation of what disability looks like and how we care for one another. And so I'm really just trying to model what I want to see in the world for other people so that we can live a little bit easier.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful. Okay, so now I have a question for Cesar. As the first deaf winner of the Mr. Gay San Francisco title, that's title, that's right, yeah, just like that. A crown, a sash, that's the title. Your visibility has had a profound impact. So my question to you is, how has this visibility shifted the narrative for LGBTQ+ and for, disabled communities?
That's a good question. So for myself, my goal was that I wanted to change the world in terms of people's perspective on the deaf community. I wanted people to understand that deaf people can do anything. Those who say deaf people can't dance, deaf people can't be a teacher, deaf people can't have sex the way that anyone else has sex, that's all forms of oppression. And I need to change that perspective worldwide. So for me, the title, Mr. Deaf Gay San Francisco, I think that is sort of a way of showing and bringing those goals to the forefront. And Mr. Gay San Francisco, I was curious when I first got into the competition, sort of what the strategy would be, what the roadmap would look like. And when I first applied, I could tell that they were a little bit at odds about what to do with me. They thought, oh, you're deaf. Okay. How's that going to work? There was a lot of questions coming at me. And I'm used to that, right? That's normal for me. That's part of my job as to be an educator. And I take that responsibility seriously. And that includes telling them I need certain access tools, such as interpreters, such as the placement of where I may stand, where others may stand or sit for visual access. And so when I was in the first round and I used ASL to perform and use sign language on stage, I remember everyone's jaws were just on the floor. I could tell from their faces that they were like, wow, deaf people can do everything. I think having quality access really showcased that that's what matters. That's what gives us a seat at the table. And I think investing in the community, the deaf community in San Francisco specifically, that can make a big change. And I think just allowing more accessibility for the deaf community is the answer. It sounds simple, but I think you, as hearing people, it feels that as deaf people, we always are trying to chase after that ideal of what normalcy looks like, what conformity looks like. And it's important for us as the deaf community to realize that we can be our own leaders. We can do it for ourselves, for our own community. We don't have to aspire to be like hearing people, you know? And we can do presentations, performances. We can be on stage. And I remember the judges of Mr. Gay San Francisco, again, were completely shocked that I was able to even get on stage and walk and do my thing. I could tell their expectations were very low for me. And I think for myself, I never put limits on my own expectations for what I can do. And so for the city of San Francisco, I think it was important to see that and to have that representation. And I know this type of event, it doesn't end at just my role as Gay San Francisco, but I spent a year after that traveling, doing workshops, teaching, educating, and doing a lot of outreach. And so now my aspiration is Mr. Gay America. I'm ready for the call. I'm going to the next level, and I can't wait to get in there and compete with everyone else. I think there's about 45 other men, and I expect to be the only deaf person once again, but that kind of experience is always worth it, just to see the audience response and reaction to being performing. And I have competed in Mr. Gay America. Out of 45, I got 8th, which I mean is not the winner, but I think is pretty good. And so I am committed to being back again next time, and I want to win #1. I want to win the title for all of USA, Mr. Gay America. So that's my goal. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Cesar. All right, I have a question for Lotus Boy. So your artistry, it spans multiple mediums, from performance to workshops, which is very impressive. How do you see art and performance as tools for advocating for disability justice and for LGBTQ plus rights? And do you have any examples you could provide?
Sure, thank you. So I really appreciate and agree with what Cesar said about just we're used to doing it our damn selves, right? We're used to completely diverging from whatever path the only paths we ever saw. We are some of the most creative people, right? Because we have to be. And a lot of disabled, neurodivergent, chronically ill folks, we know these systems aren't designed for us to survive and thrive. And so I really draw on a lot of inspiration from so many other disabled artists. And again, specifically the queer and trans and BIPOC disabled artists. And for me, it's been both with art, right? I have always been drawn to different forms like of performance. So before I did drag, the first ever type of performance I did was musical theater. Surprise, surprise. The musical theater to drag pipeline is just a straight line, or a gay line. I appreciate that laugh. And before I did drag, I did slam poetry and competitive poetry, which is where I quite literally found my voice again after experiencing some really intense sexual violence and physical violence. Another one of my disabilities is PTSD and anxiety and depression. And with that, right, and especially being a neurodivergent person, like, I can't just do the same thing over and over again, right? Maybe some of y'all can relate. Maybe you have had points in your life already where you're like, you know, what I'm doing for my career or my hobbies, you know, they just don't resonate with me anymore in the same way. Or this actually isn't my true calling, and I don't feel my spirit ignited every time I walk into my cubicle. Sorry, not shading anyone who works at a cubicle, but like, I don't know how y'all can do it, because yeah, besides the physical pain, just my brain would melt. But you know, it's really true, right? And so for me, even though my primary and most common type of performance is drag, I don't limit myself to just like lip syncing, right? Which is what a lot of people mostly associate with drag. I also do poetry. I have dabbled in a bit of stand-up, sit-down, lie-down comedy, which was the name of my performance that I did, because who says, why do we all have to stand up and do comedy? Why can't we sit? Why can't we lay down? My whole bit, I had this chair that could change. It starts as like a regular chair, and then you can morph it into a daybed. So I'm standing at first, then I take a seat, and then I ask an able-bodied volunteer from the audience to come up and help me transform it into a daybed. And so again, you know, even though that's like a very silly example in a very small way, I think like it's so important to be constantly challenging people's perceptions. Again, like what Cesar said, of like what disabled people can and should and will be. And right, like we are constantly, I know this is a maybe cliche phrase, but like breaking down barriers and constantly shattering the glass, I don't know, brick at this point, ceilings, a lot of the times. And so I try to do that wherever possible with my art. I also write original music. I have 2 different songs that are all about disability and accessibility, and also educating people on those things, because you know, even though it's not our job to always be educating people about our axes of oppression, it just happens, right? It happens sometimes when so many people have never heard of an access need before. It happens that we constantly have to be re-explaining ourselves and convincing people why we need certain things, you know, especially when ageism comes into play, right? I think we're all, I'm gonna just assume, but I think we're all probably of similar millennial age on this panel. And so, you know, but even before that, right, especially when I was younger, and because at the time I didn't use a mobility aid and my disabilities were largely not visible to seeing people, people all the time just were like, oh, well, you're faking it, or, you know, just try harder, all of these things. So with art, like, it is such a gift, and I truly would not be here today if I had not found and really accepted that art is such a necessary thing for me. And if we look at art and also all movements, right, any social justice or, you know, civil rights type movement, there's always artists at the forefront of those movements, right? Who are contributing in different ways, who are using their art and their voices and their platforms to share the messages or to challenge people's assumptions. And because so many of us, like, we have to, right? We have to do this to survive. for me, it truly is that way. I do feel like if I wasn't an artist, I would not survive. And similar to what Rosemary said as well, I've been very blessed and privileged with different opportunities that have been offered to me, or collaborators who've come to me with different, proposals of, hey, can we do a show together? Or can you host this thing? So I also do hosting sometimes when I have the energy. And with that has been such a privilege, because again, how often do you see disabled people in positions of like relative power and leadership and decision making? And when I am producing a show, oh, you better believe it's gonna be accessible, and it's gonna be COVID safer, and it's going to be completely remote, right? So being able to be given these opportunities, or just to, find them myself, right, by applying for grants or asking for mutual aid from my community, which I also rely on to survive, as so many of us do. Say, hey, do y'all want to see more disabled people on stages? Okay, can we all fund this show so that we can, Being given those opportunities, I really don't take that lightly, and I do feel like, it is just such a gift to be able to do the things by us for us, right? By us for us that we want to keep seeing in the world. And because, I'm out here moving on Crip time, right? I'm not one of those kings who's doing 5 drag shows every single week. Bless those able folks who can. It gives a different experience, right? When I'm not always working under the ableist racial capitalist system that we live under, right? That expects us to be always producing a certain amount in a certain way. Similarly to what Rosemary shared too, I use every position and leadership position I have to also open those doors for other disabled folks, right, of all different abilities and disabilities, because, yeah, that's who I want to see on stages, right? Like, I want to just always use share the wealth, right, share the resources, and we need to all do that, right? If we really want to see more accessible spaces in a more accessible world, I think that it really, it can't always be us, right? It can't always be us doing all the work. We have to see more from other folks who are future disabled people. That's a concept that a lot of disability scholars that I really admire, I know have ascribed to, right? That, everyone is going to experience disability at some point in their life, maybe multiple points. Whether or not you use the word disabled to describe yourself, it's gonna happen. And so, even if you don't care about other people, which you should care about yourself, right? And care about when you're gonna need help one day, right? And when you're gonna be like, oh dang, I wish that this building was not 7 floors with no elevator, right? You want to see that for yourself too. You should want better for yourself. And the last thing I will share as another final example, just because I have to, give a shout out to Alex Locust / Glamputee, who I'm sure y'all saw or heard or witnessed their beautiful keynote speech earlier, as also someone who's a good friend of mine and an artist and organizer and disability justice big brain who I really admire and who I see also pushing a lot of boundaries. So one performance that is just always going to go down in history is when she won the Butch Queen pageant last year, and it was ground zero, right? There was no question that she was going to win after her performance, but what she worked into it was an access break. In the middle of the performance, which was a very high energy, so much choreo, so much fun. Right in the middle, there was a pause on the screen behind them. It just said access break, and then they took a break. They sat down, they had some water, they had all their backup dancers taking a break, which is so cool. I've never seen that before in a performance, and I think we should, I don't like the word normalize all the time, but it's the only word that's coming to mind. I think we should normalize that, right? Normalize the fact that yeah, drag is a lot of energy. Even though the performances are 5 minutes, like, we're doing a lot in those 5 minutes, and taking a break in the middle, like, even if you don't have disabilities, you deserve a break if you're tired, right? Like what Rosemary said earlier, we all have access needs. So I am just constantly inspired by the other disabled artists who have also paved the way and continue to pave different possibilities for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Lotus Boy. Now I have a question for Rosemary. Rosemary, your extensive experience includes running youth leadership forums. Also, it includes advocating for disability inclusion in major projects, like the projects Crip Camp and Fire Through Dry Grass. So my question to you is, how has working with youth and in the film industry influenced your approach to disability advocacy?
So if you all, just by a show of hands, has anyone seen Crip Camp yet? Oh, great, thank God. Okay. So just to give a little bit of background and context, Crip Camp is a documentary that is available on Netflix. It talks about the history of the 504 sit-in that happened in San Francisco, which then led to the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It came out in 2020. It was executive produced by Barack and Michelle Obama. And it was a huge moment for the disability community to see our history and our lives on such a massive platform like Netflix and co-signed by the Obamas. It's like the biggest pie in the sky dream that we could ever have, is because I started as a young person, a youth volunteer at the age of 16, going into high schools in San Diego County, trying desperately to teach disability history. And so for me, little me at 16, teaching disability history, and then fast forward 10 years, and I'm watching it on TV, it was like I couldn't stop crying because I was like, we made it. This is it. What more could happen after this? And I think my experience in film was really just an accident. I did not, here's the secret, I don't actually watch a lot of movies. I watch the movies that I work on, but I'm not in film. I am not like, this is my favorite space. But I was brought onto the Crip Camp Impact campaign because of my experience as an organizer, because I know the language of the disability community, and because of my experience in educating and knowing the history as deeply as I do. And that was why I was brought on. The two leaders who were in charge of the Impact campaign were Stacey Park Milburn and Andrea Levant, two incredible BIPOC, queer, disabled people who had been doing it for longer than I had, and they noticed the work that I did and brought me onto the campaign. And so I think one of the things that I've taken from my experience and from working on Crip Camp is not forgetting the people that you've met and continuing to stay in contact with them and have a network of folks that you can pull from. And again, elevating the voices of other folks who have not had those opportunities. Because I had the opportunity to work on the film Crip Camp and our Impact campaign, I then worked on another film, which is available on PBS, and it's called Fire Through Dry Grass. And it's a very different film, still a documentary, but it highlights the stories of 4 Black and brown disabled men who are young, who are victims of gun violence, who are living in a nursing home in New York. And they attached GoPros to their wheelchairs and they filmed what was happening in nursing homes during lockdown in 2020. And they did that, and once people watch the film, the first question that comes out is, what sparked you to film? What made you decide that this is something worth telling? And the answer is, we had to survive. No one was listening to us. No one believed us. And so we had to film in order to survive. It wasn't I want to win an Oscar and have a great documentary film. They needed to document so that they could show that the government, that the state, that the city, that the CDC was all lying. And they were not protecting disabled lives. They weren't protecting Black and brown lives. They weren't protecting folks who were in nursing home and long care facilities. So much so that this documentary has now pushed forward a movement called Nursing Home Lives Matter, and really giving voice to folks who are still living in institutions. And for folks who have seen Crip Camp, you know that there's a history of disabled people put in institutions, and that is not something that just stopped in the 80s. There are still, in this very moment, Black and brown disabled people living in institutions because living in their community is not an option. Whether they are undocumented, they have felonies on their record, they don't have access to accessible housing, they don't have the support that they need. There's a whole list of reasons why folks are not in community. And that means that a lot of times our history has put us, and I say us as like quote unquote non-normative bodies, whether it's race, gender identity, disability, the way that you speak or present yourself, have been locked away in institutions because it's out of sight, out of mind. If we don't see you, we don't have to think about you, we don't have to provide services. And so working on all of these films, working with these really deeply intentional communities has brought lots of other aspects to my advocacy. It's not just enough to speak on a panel and make sure that we have captions, but it is the space accessible? Do we have crip time? Are we building in breaks? Are we making sure that language access is a priority? And young people and marginalized people within disability community spaces are the best at finding solutions and being creative and thinking outside of the box. And as I've been working on documentary films, there are impact campaigns that use the film as a tool to educate people about a very specific issue. And the reason why the campaigns that I have worked on have been so successful is because I didn't know anything about film before. I didn't try to mirror every other impact campaign that has existed. I do what I know how to do, which is organize my community and to bring folks in and to have really rich, deep conversations about the things that need to happen. And then we organize and we do something afterwards. And so that's what I really love in both youth spaces and accidentally falling into film spaces is getting at the heart of activism through lots of different venues that people don't typically center youth. They don't center the voices of young people because they don't think that their experiences are valid, or they can't vote, or they don't know enough yet. And the royal they, leave out marginalized voices. And so when I'm in these spaces, it allows me to really think outside of the box and imagine a world that does not look like the one that we're currently living in. And we live in someone else's reality that they dreamt up, not mine, because mine would look very different from this. But if someone else can create that imagination and we're living in it, then why can't we create something too?
Wonderful. Thank you, Rosemary. We We have a little bit of time left. So before I wrap up, I would like to open it up to the audience to see if anyone has any questions for our panelists. If you do, please raise your hand. And if someone raises their hand, we'll get a microphone over to you. Is there anybody who'd like to start? Over there.
I have a question, like, how can we make more spaces like schools, libraries, like grocery stores more disability inclusive?
That was a general question to any of the panelists. Would anybody here like to answer that question? Okay, Rosemary.
I'll start. Hire disabled people is usually my first answer. If you want spaces to be more inclusive, that means you have to hire people in these spaces to think outside of the box. We're not expecting all able-bodied people to think about access all the time. It would be great if you did, and it meant that I didn't have to be in every meeting because my calendar is booked and busy. But if you hire disabled people, they have the lived experience, they have the plug-in community, and they can think of the barriers that have typically been in institutional spaces like schools, libraries, and grocery stores. And yeah, that's what I'll say.
And I'll add, for the perspective of deaf accessibility, I think that it's important to be patient, just remembering that. I think a lot of people really quickly, as soon as I approach them and say I'm deaf, they're like, oh, well, can you lip read? And if I can't lip read, they're like, oh, and I see the attitude, right? They don't even want to write back and forth with me. They're not behaving like humans with me and with each other. And so I think, remember that patience. And then I mentioned my story about helping to get access on Muni, putting those screens up so that captions are accessible. Those are just really basic everyday things you can do. Be a person, provide captions, be patient.
Lotus Boy, do you have anything to add?
Just a few things. I agree with everything that's already been said. In addition to hiring disabled folks, hire disabled designers and create more opportunities for disabled people to get into design, industrial design, like engineering design. An ex-partner of mine who was also disabled and neurodivergent was studying industrial design in school, and just by witnessing all of their projects and their studies, I was like, wow, yeah, literally 90, and I think one of their professors even said this, like 99% of the world is not designed for people with disabilities. And so it also, yes, more disabled people everywhere, and also literally giving them the access, the tools, the opportunities to create, like tangibly create these realities and spaces, physical spaces for other people to be in and see what is possible. Absolutely.
If I could just add one more thing, this is Rosemary. I think a lot of times in school and in libraries, the approach to making things more accessible is you request a need and they decide if that need is going to be met. And that I would like to shatter. And again, if we're going based on everyone has collective access needs, what would make a library more accessible? What would make a learning space more accessible? Rather than saying, well, your IEP says this. If it's not in your IEP, we can't do it. That's not inclusive. That's services-based. It makes me feel like a checklist, not a person. And so if we're thinking holistically, there are lots of benefits to having wider aisles and easier navigable spaces. Lots of people use captions, not just deaf folks. Some people understand easier from reading, or maybe English is not their first language. There's so many multitudes of reasons that access blends in so beautifully if we're thinking about it intentionally and not just approaching it like a checklist.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up now. If you have any more questions for our panelists, please do email them to our team, and we will definitely get answers to those questions, okay? And now, I would like to go ahead and close this panel, and I would like to have extend a round of applause to all of our panelists today. Thank you so much.